The Monster Hunter franchise is no stranger to challenging boss fights. When your whole gameplay loop revolves around slaying monsters to craft better gear to face tougher monsters, it's a given that some difficulties will arise. However, from the very beginning to its more recent entries, Monster Hunter has doled out some of the most arduous bosses in gaming. Without further ado, here are the top 25 most difficult monsters, starting with 25. Safi'jiiva, Iceborne. If Xeno'jiiva was the somewhat awkward final boss for World, then Safi'jiiva is its revenge arc. As a siege quest, it has the same requirements as Kulve-Taroth, 16 hunters in separate groups of 4 battling and breaking its parts to slay it. The difference is its sheer power and range of attacks, especially the beams, which it can fire off at a moment's notice. It also possesses a supernova attack that, like Behemoth's Ecliptic Meteor, recovers by running behind cover to evade. While it becomes easier as you bring more suitable weapons for breaking its parts and taking advantage of the environment, soloing Safi'jiiva is another endeavor entirely. 24. Hazard Primordial Malzeno, Sunbreak. As the final post-launch monster added to Sunbreak, it makes sense for Primordial Malzeno to be nothing short of an ordeal. However, as always, the event quest version goes above and beyond, as Hazard Primordial Malzeno ups the damage significantly. Its Blood Rage state becomes more devastating as time goes on, but while its attacks become more intricate, it also gets worn out quicker, creating more chances to attack. That push and pull dynamic makes it one of the more reasonable monsters on this list, even if it's exceedingly difficult. 23. X-Bolt Reaver, GU. What if Estalos, but one that attacks more frequently and can even create an energy blade from its head? X-Bolt Reaver is a real doozy, and it's made all the more infuriating by how it alternates between moving around and casually tossing a fast-moving electric orb that chunks half of your health. The key is to break its head crest and make it susceptible to flash pods, thus creating more openings to pile on the damage. But getting there is another matter entirely. 22. Descent into Hades Stygian Zinogre, Monster Hunter 3U. Swap Thunder for Dragon Elements and you have Stygian Zinogre. Though it's no stranger to casting lightning, you'll get Dragon Blight, which essentially seals your elemental damage. For Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, a special Stygian Zinogre Descent into Hades was introduced, and someone decided that it should have much more health while dealing more damage. And just for good measure, run around all the time, which is saying something for a Zinogre. 21. Arc-Tempered Velkhana, Iceborne. Introduced in Iceborne, Velkhana took a backseat in threat level to the final boss and Nergigante, who ironically took a backseat in the base game. While a tempered version is available to remind you of its potency, Arc-Tempered Velkhana is where things get really serious. Possessing an aura that increases ice damage dealt by 50%, it can potentially one-shot the player with its Frost Breath, Exploding Cascade, and more. 20. Apex Zinogre Emergency Quest from Rise. If you enjoyed fighting the regular Apex Zinogre in Monster Hunter Rise but thought it would be much more enjoyable if it hit harder, then the Emergency Quest version is for you. It's already annoying enough to deal with its extensive mobility, which isn't the worst compared to other entries in the franchise, but still. You also must dodge his constant barrage of attacks and borderline criminal hitboxes. Finding the right opening is key, but it's a brutal fight through and through, even when tackled with Master Rank gear. 19. Hyper Silver Rathalos, GU. Much like X-Bolt Reaver, Hyper Silver Rathalos' one weakness is flash pods, so if you have enough, there are plenty of opportunities to knock it out of the sky. If you don't, prepare for a constant barrage of fireballs that easily kill, to say nothing of its insane damage while walking around. Regardless of either strategy, however, it also has a lot of health, which means spending more time trying to survive and deal damage without messing it up. 18. Hyper Devilo, GU. One of the goofiest and yet most terrifying monsters in the franchise, Devilo is characterized by its extensive hunger and rage state that makes it super unpredictable. The Savage version is rough since it's constantly enraged, but the Hyper version adds on to that with, you guessed it, more health and damage alongside stronger Dragon Blight inducing breath. 17. Dread Queen Raytheon, GU. If you cheesed Hyper Silver Rathalos and maybe Hyper Gold Raytheon with flash pods, then Dread Queen Raytheon is bad news. Along with Dread King Rathalos, it's immune to them while flying around. You won't have to worry too much about her fire attacks, but the poison is a different issue, especially when she could just toss out spikes that inflict the same. The fact that her shell is sturdy, limiting options for concentrating attacks, is yet another challenge. 16. Ivory Logiacruz, Monster Hunter 3U. What's more terrifying than a Logiacruz with more damage? One that prefers to hang around on land. Ivory Logiacruz falls into both categories, and while it also deals thunder damage like the regular version, the area of effect is larger, making them much more difficult to avoid. The only thing worse is the version in the quest Cruel King of the Sea, which is much tankier and arguably even more devastating. 15. Devil Diablos Freedom Unite. There is no shortage of annoying bosses in Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, but the least obvious is Devil Diablos, better known as 1.5 Horns. It shouldn't ordinarily be so punishing, at least as far as Diablos goes, but your gear is nowhere good enough to deal with its sheer damage and health pool when it first becomes available. The best option is to return with fully upgraded G-Rank armor and weapons. No half measures. 14. Level 140 Apex Rajang, Monster Hunter 4U. Everyone's favorite fanged beast who's also an absolute powerhouse and will toss you and other monsters like it's nothing. But even the monkey's most ardent admirers won't defend his level 140 Apex form in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, purely because it takes everything terrifying about it and cranks up the damage to an unreasonable level. Traps and status effects are effective, but it's still a dice roll on whether you'll even survive long enough. 13. Elytrion, Monster Hunter 3U. Regardless of the game, Elytrion is always a difficulty spike for even the most experienced hunters. Right off the bat, its ability to harness multiple elements like fire, dragon, ice, and thunder makes it a terrifying threat. Usually, you would exploit its elemental weaknesses even when it changes its forms to break its horns and ground it. This is unfortunately not the case in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, where it will keep flying regardless, raining death from above. The only saving grace is that, unlike its Iceborne version, there is no Eschaton judgment to deal with. 12. 140 GQ Apex Ogre, Monster Hunter 4U. Unnaturally fast, even when recovering from its trademark somersault, extensive amounts of damage and health, and because of its Apex state, you need to whittle down its hide to remove much of the damage resistance. Y-stones are useful in this regard, which makes Apex Ogre all the more annoying, since it's so highly mobile and you need to be able to inflict elemental damage to conquer it. 11. Risen Shigaru Magala, Special Investigation from Sunbreak. My first memory of Shigaru Magala is watching it take to the skies to power up for its Frenzy Beam, before I then attempted to flee via Palamute. The next memory is that same beam sweeping across the arena and one-shotting me in jaw-dropping fashion. Risen Shigaru Magala is an even stronger version, but the Special Investigation version deals even more damage, making it that much more of a pain for a fully kitted Master Rank player. Worst of all, those beams are bigger and reach even further. 10. Risen Crimson Glow Valstrax, Special Investigation from Rise. A quick 20 minutes in and out to break its claws for materials, and well, you know how it goes. Crimson Glow Valstrax was already one of the toughest monsters from the base, so getting a Risen version in Sunbreak made for an even more challenging encounter. However, this version is downright insane, with almost every attack either one or two-shotting you. If you're skilled enough against the regular version, it's doable, but there's little to no room for error. 9. Clashing Fist Brachydios, Monster Hunter 3U. By its very nature, Brachydios can be a tricky fight between its hard hits and blast damage, especially the Raging variant from Iceborne. However, very few can hold a candle to Clashing Fist Brachydios, whose damage is on another level, even for those with fully upgraded G-Rank armor. Of course, it also has lots of health, dragging out the fight and creating more opportunities for it to one-shot you. 8. Arrogant Duramadira, Frontier Z. An extreme variant and yet another Elder Dragon that doesn't mess around. Arrogant Duramadira harnesses thunder instead of ice, firing it in many directions. The real threat is in its faster attacks on top of its beams now inflicting corrupted poison and being much more common. One of its attacks even involves slamming down with both claws and immediately following up with a sweeping beam, in case you had any plans of living. Though its attacks can become predictable after a point, you need deft timing to avoid them, and enough damage to get through the fight. 7. Hunting Road White Fatalist, Frontier Z. The legendary Black Dragon is often used as the ultimate boss in various entries, as we'll get into in Iceborne. However, there's also a more powerful white version because, like Marvel's Asgardians, age equals more power. Then you have the White Fatalist appearing in Hunting Road, a separate mode. As you'd expect with regular Fatalists, it deals a boatload of damage and can one-shot, including a move that wipes the player off the face of the arena. No carding required. 6. Extreme Behemoth, World. The many months of waiting for Final Fantasy XIV's Behemoth were proven worthwhile when it came crashing down with all of the subtlety of its many meteors. The regular version offered new mechanics, like taking aggro and showcasing the names of attacks, giving it that real MMO feel. Then we have Extreme Behemoth, or Extremoth, a profound torturer that even Master Rank players will struggle with solo. Remember all those annoying spells like Cryptis, Thunderbolt, and Meteor? Imagine Extremoth casting them off cooldown like it's Path of Exile. It's also much more aggressive, barely offering time to attack before it preps the next spell. Now imagine also dealing with Ecliptic Meteor, which will cart you if you're not taking cover, or using jump at the right time. 5. Solstice War Disaphora, Frontier G Genuine. Fought at the fittingly named World's End, Disaphora is an elder dragon that can inflict fire, ice, and dragon damage, just like Elatrion. As you'd probably expect, it can unleash multiple powerful area of effect attacks, and there's a constant, pervading sense of danger, and one-shots throughout. Having to slay it within 25 minutes seems bad enough, but some players eventually succeeded. Solstice War Disaphora is a whole other basket case, except the contents are more pain and suffering. It's essentially similar to the max level conquest versions of the monster, which deals more damage and receives less as it levels up. The cap is level 9999 by the way. However, Solstice War Disaphora goes even further with new attacks and a brand new phase that attacks faster. Such is the monster's power that it's considered an even more challenging fight than White Fatalist, which is saying something. 4. Fatalist, Iceborne. The final boss of Monster Hunter World, Iceborne story-wise, and one of the most challenging experiences in the series. Considering Fatalist's name lives in legend and its very presence spells calamity, it's not too surprising initially. Until you're one-shotted by its fire projectiles. Until your health is whittled down to nothing with its fire streams. Until it flies up into the sky and you must take shelter inside a ruined castle or you'll die. Even its physical attacks deal ridiculous amounts of damage. The real kick in the teeth? You have only 30 minutes to kill it, and you must do so while solo to unlock the multiplayer version of the quest. The next entry on this is unfiltered nonsense with its setting, but in terms of pure endgame challenge, nothing tops Fatalist. 3. Ancient Leshen, World. One of the cooler collaboration quests in Monster Hunter World is The Witcher 3's Wild Hunt, especially since you can play as Geralt of Rivia. The regular Leshen is also a fun boss fight, and the presentation is incredible. Naturally, you'd think to fight the Ancient Leshen and obtain some of the best rewards available, namely the armor that transforms you into Ciri and her signature sword, Zariel. It's hard to describe the moment of clarity after that. The fact that it summons many more monsters to attack you while also immobilizing you, or the absurd health, permanently sealed for 4 players and dwarfing that of Fatalist solo. Maybe it's the ridiculous damage, but perhaps the most baffling thing is that it's a high-rank quest that even Master Rank players will struggle with. 2. Ex-Bloodbath Diablos, GU. An optional hunt, but one that requires defeating all the other G1 Deviant monsters, that too after conquering the final story boss. Surely it couldn't be anything nightmare-inducing, right? A regular Diablos and its variant, Black Diablos, are terrifying enough, but what about a souped-up version that becomes stronger as it loses health and becomes permanently enraged when weak? That's ex-Bloodbath Diablos in a nutshell. Better not cart when it's in that enraged state, by the way, if only because it will insta-kill you again as soon as you return. 1. Burning Freezing Arazirian, Frontier. When you think of the strongest Elder Dragon, what comes to mind? Fatalist? Elatrion? Disaphoria? For those who played Monster Hunter Frontier, it was Arizurian, but not the usual kind. No, this was Burning Freezing Arizurian, a creature that could deal extreme fire and ice blights, while also ironically being weak to fire and ice. Its AoE attacks are massive, but not as massive as its 1 million, yes, 1 million HP. Not only did one have to play perfectly to dodge everything to survive, but do so over an extended period. Such was the difficulty that it would be months before anyone conquered it solo.